G'day there once again viewers, your mate Kamikaze78 here, coming to you guys with some more Planetside 2 content. So guys, there's been a couple of big topics cropping up in the Planetside 2 communities of late. Planetside Arena, server performance issues, and the future of the game in 2019 in general are among some of the key discussion points. But one that I want to focus on in today's video is the interaction between skilled players and new players in the Planetside 2 community. Now, this has been a topic addressed by other personalities in the community before myself as of late, but this video isn't going to be in direct response to those creators. I've seen the videos created by these said creators and each of them have made good discussion points, but I have no intention of pointing fingers and name calling in this video. I don't even plan on referencing the content of other creators. I only intend to add to the conversation with what I hope will be a very unique look at the new player experience of Planetside 2 and how it interacts with the more skilled veteran player base, and some of you may disagree with me from the get-go. This is a very extreme point of view that I have, but allow me to make a case and we will discuss it below. This video will probably be a bit longer because this is something that I have put a lot of notes down for, but we'll see how we go. But anyway, Planetside 2 has always had an issue with retaining new players. It's been an issue constantly evaluated by the developers, and it's been discussed a lot as of late as we lead into a period of new ventures for the Planetside universe, with Planetside Arena coming out in late January. As of late, the discussion has changed tune to focus on the idea of long-term veterans of the game being the cause of this issue, by farming the new players in fights and demolishing them as they're trying to learn how to capture a base, how to use their gun effectively, or learn the way in which their class works. However, I take a different stance on this. I personally don't believe that veterans playing the game as they would are the cause of the new player experience being a tough break in Planetside 2. Sometimes these veterans are what can make a new player stay for the long term through mentorship squads, but even with players in the game who prefer to just get their farm on, you could still have a BR15 player who knows how to aim their gun and find an angle that allows for them to farm a few bodies. Farming happens regardless of what kind of players are at a base, whether they are 6 years or 6 days into the game. The skill of a player in a 1v1 combat environment comes from how much experience they've had with basic level shooter mechanics and how they can read a situation. And with that, I think that some may find what I'm about to say a little bit shocking. After years of playing this game, after years of playing Planetside 2, I believe that when it comes to the new player experience, it is an inherently flawed experience, and it's an issue that might very well be solved with Planetside Arena's massive clash mode. Again, bear with me here. Now, this standpoint doesn't come from the challenge of unlocking certs easily in the game, or, learning the gunplay, or even the functionality of a class in the game. The new player experience, as far as progression is concerned, has never been better, and probably will never be better. Stock weapons now have access to 1x red dot sights straight off the bat. Each class will get some suit slot options to better tailor to a playstyle, and new players will earn 100 certs per battle rank, all the way up to battle rank 15, which is more than enough to make a semi-decent medic or engineer class, which will help a new player pay for itself in the long run. The early game progression continues to reward you and invites new players to continue to get better at the game. The gunplay in Planetside 2 is very similar to that of shooters on the market. There are damage profiles, there is both vertical and horizontal weapon recoil, there is cone of fire for hip firing, aiming, moving, standing still, etc. There is muzzle velocity. Pretty much all of the mechanics and stats that make a weapon what it is in Planetside 2 are the same building blocks that can be found in shooters such as the Battlefield franchise. Even class gameplay in Planetside 2 is fairly easy to understand. Engineer and medic roles are extremely self-explanatory, and they fill the same roles as other games that also feature this class-based gameplay. The infiltrator building blocks of having a sniper rifle with a cloak is a sci-fi twist on the Battlefield Recon class that also acts as a main scout class. So once again, the way classes are laid out in the game, with the exception of possibly existing in the Heavy Assault, are fairly consistent with other shooters out there. I mean, hell, even the concept of the capture point in bases in Planetside 2 is just a scaled up or scaled down version of the conquest mode from the Battlefield games. You see a point on the map, you either capture it or defend it, depending on who owns it. It's as simple as that. This is a gameplay objective that has existed since the inception of online shooters in some cases. These are not alien concepts or mechanics to a modern first-person shooter player, and in turn, isn't where the issues with Planetside Planetside 2's new player experience lie. If a player enters a game with little FPS experience where the mechanics are alien to them, then this is why the in-game tutorial steps in and clarifies things, and it actually does it really well. It covers all of the core mechanic bases that Planetside 2 has that other first-person shooter titles have. But no, the issue with Planetside 2's new player experience doesn't lie with the core mechanics of the game that can be found in other shooters. Weapon mechanics, basic level objective mechanics, class mechanics, for the most part, are all fairly self-explanatory, and if a new player doesn't understand these core mechanics, the in-game tutorial and the tutorials created by content creators fill these gaps of knowledge. The issue, in fact, lies in the fact that Planetside is an entirely unique take on the first-person shooter genre. There are three main characteristics that Planetside 2 uses as its selling point to make the game what it is today. These three characteristics forge Planetside 2 into the game that we veterans love so dearly, but they also are the factors that make the new player experience an absolute nightmare to get into, as they are things that you cannot teach players how to deal with. It is something that needs to be dealt with on a personal level, a personal experience. These three characteristics are asymmetric balance, persistent online world, and scale, all of which are characteristics that other first-person shooter games have incorporated in the past, but never to the extent that Planetside 2 has. One of Planetside 2's main characteristics is the fact that it is persistent. There is no matching here. There are no matches, and understanding just what to look for in regards to a fight as a new player is a hell of a challenge. In all other shooter games out there, a game commences, the action will be fairly consistent across the duration of the match, and when it ends, you do it all again. Planetside 2, you are faced with a massive 64 square kilometer map where each base or hex could even be compared to the size of some first-person shooter maps, and when an assault is completed or thwarted by the defending faction, the quote-unquote match that was taking place at this quote-unquote map has now ended, and Planetside 2 differs here by, instead of having a server change map and keeping the population rather organized, the population must now look to themselves and decide where they're going to go by looking at the map, and decide which base to attack or defend first, depending on the movements of the imposing faction that they were just versing. The responsibility of a player to find their own fight is something unique to Planetside 2, and is the only shooter that I know of that requires you to read a map on such a large scale in order to find your fight. But then, it's one thing to look at a map and see where the fights are, it's another thing to decide what is a quote-unquote good fight based on this information. A 96 plus spawn room camp session will still show up as a fight on the map, but it won't be a good one. But by the same token, a 96 plus versus 96 plus Biolab deadlock fight might seem a bit boring to a new player, but they won't know exactly how to tell how the fight is playing out until they get there, which could form a bad impression on the gameplay. Now, a way to potentially get around this would be to, create the golden rule, per se, for a new player and just simply tell them to follow a crowd down a lattice line and continue attacking bases. But that may too end up being just a Zerg ghost capping session down a line with little to no resistance, which is again, not exactly fun gameplay in a first-person shooter. Now, on top of that, traditional first-person shooters allow for players to select their gameplay experience via a server browser or matchmaker, which can allow for a new player to control their initial experience with the game a little bit more, selectively, allowing for them to grow into new experiences in the game at their own pace. A player may start with team deathmatch in a traditional game because that is something that they're used to, then they can move on to the more objective-based game modes and they can select what map they want to play on, that sort of thing. Planetside 2 is very much the opposite. It presents the fight and then requires the player to twist the scenario to their own benefit using the tools at their disposal. The new player is responsible for finding and tailoring a fight to their needs. It comes from this sandbox design that Planetside 2 follows that really allows for players to approach a situation in any way that they see fit, but to a new player, this can be incredibly overwhelming. On top of that, Planetside is a game that turns the whole asymmetric combat theme dial right up to 11. The three factions in the game each have their own characteristics that doesn't make any one of them overpowered, but each gives them different playstyles, weapons, vehicles that have their own advantages and disadvantages in combat. Now, moving deeper than the three factions, asymmetric gameplay is present even in the classes in the game, with the heavy assault, light assault, infiltrator, and even engineer and combat medic, each having their own ways to approach combat that make them more powerful in certain situations over the other classes. And while we content creators can preach the point of default weapons being some of the best guns in the game, and each faction / class having their own advantages that creates a fairly balanced playing field, it's really easy to point the finger as a new player and start claiming that a certain faction, vehicle, or weapon is overpowered because someone killed them with it. And believe it or not, most other first-person shooters tend to counteract this kind of mentality, because come later down the line of progression, a player will, continually get killed by weapons unlocked at a later stage, and this player will gain access to the weapons in which they wish to use based on that experience, and using these weapons gives players a first-hand impression on how the weapons perform and how they can beat them. With Planetside 2's focus on faction-specific weapons and tools, the new player will get killed by a weapon that they will never have the pleasure of trying in some cases. Due to a lacking perspective that is caused by this faction-specific design, a new player is going to more quickly come to the conclusion in their mind that some weapons have a distinct advantage over others that they own. Planetside asymmetry, while it gives the game more identity overall, can make for a steep learning curve for new players. A learning curve which requires them to go into weapon statistics sites, read up on the statistics, make sense of the statistics, and figure out how they can best counteract weapons that they've been getting killed by a lot. But above all else, we arrive at the one element that makes the new player experience of Planetside 2 an absolute shit show to get through. And annoyingly enough, it is the one thing that Planetside 2 uses to sell itself. It is, of course, the scale. Planetside 2 is the only shooter to have ever existed that can sport massive, all-out battles of hundreds of players, sometimes thousands of players, all using combined arms of infantry, aircraft, and land vehicles in an attempt to make a claim on a small piece of land on a massive continent. I mean, for crying out loud, the game holds a Guinness World Record for the most amount of players in a single first-person shooter battle, and it does this with flying colours to create some of the most impressive battles to have ever graced the first-person shooter genre of gaming. The battles are downright spectacles to behold, let alone to take part in, but they are spectacles that are exclusive to Planetside 2. Nowhere else can provide you this experience, and once a new player figures out how to read the map, find a fight, what asymmetric combat in the game looks like, they need to then put all this together into the giant fight where an enemy soldier could be literally anywhere at any given point in time. The best way to describe a Planetside 2 battle, even as a player who has been playing this game since day dot, is a sensory overload. You are overloaded with visual and audio cues that suggest enemy positions, abilities of particular classes activating, incoming aircraft, bullets flying past your head, callouts made by both enemy and ally players, and all of this information is provided all at once at any given point in time, caused by hundreds of players at the same time. I said sensory overload, didn't I? Actually, no, I take that back. I mean sensory clusterfuck. When you are caught in the middle of one of these battles, you will need to make sense of all the signals that you are being given to break down the situation and figure out just how you can best make the impact on the battlefield. And knowing how to do that comes from knowledge of the game, the base you're at, how it's laid out, the population counts, and the force multipliers that are present. This is a challenge that any new player will face in the game straight away, and it is unfortunately a challenge that we cannot teach them to deal with. The harsh truth about all this, guys, is that there is no amount of tutorial content that the developers can put into the game or content that content creators can create that will counteract this sensory clusterfuck that a new player will experience. It is an unteachable skill that must be learned through constant exposure to the gameplay. Sure, we can create squads with the intention of helping new players, but the game also forces those new players to find those mentor squads upon entry to the game. There is no way for a squad leader to sit in the warp gate and differentiate a new player from an experienced one. There is no indication of directive score or battle rank until such a player has actually made it into the squad. So once again, the responsibility is placed on the new player to source the help they need, and on a busy server, there could be pages of squads to look through before they actually come across a squad that is actually focusing on mentoring new players. Overall, the way the game flows is going to be inherently frustrating for a new player to learn, and when you combine that with the lacking of matchmaking, high-skilled players who know the game like the back of their hand and have been playing for years will always be present in the same battles as those new players, and we cannot, I repeat, we cannot vilify those players for wanting to come into the game, shoot some stuff, and call it a day. All play a video game to have fun, and when the game of choice doesn't provide any kind of matchmaking, the players who are very good at the game can't control who they come up against. It also isn't the responsibility of a veteran player to actively track down players of lesser skill and train them up, as not everyone enjoys that style of play, and at the end of the day, this is a game. And again, this isn't to discredit Planetside 2, it's just a frustrating game to get into because it is so unique. It's a double-edged sword for the title. However, with Planetside Arena being right around the corner, we may very well see a solution to the issues that Planetside 2 comes with in regards to its new player experience. For all those who don't know, Planetside Arena is launching with a massive Clash game mode on top of the Battle Royale game mode. This game mode pits 250 players versus 250 players in a more controlled, yet still fairly large-scale environment. This will in turn pit players into a fairly large-scale shooter environment. I don't think there's actually another first-person shooter out there that even does 250 versus 250, but correct me if I'm wrong there. Either way, players will be put into a large-scale shooter environment, which will organize players into a match-like environment where there is a definite beginning and an end, where players will be able to learn some of the nuances of the Planetside universe. As we've seen in the gameplay of Planetside Arena, there are plenty of weapons in Planetside Arena that take inspiration and sometimes I believe are going to be direct copies from Planetside 2. So once again, new players are going to be able to learn the nuances of the Planetside universe, learn that each weapon is truly a side grade, and learn some of the different cues that can appear in a Planetside game that will better prepare them for Planetside 2. I want to make it clear that I'm not expecting Planetside Arena to be a direct training guide for how Planetside 2 will function. But with that said, I do hope that the Planetside Arena experience, especially in Massive Clash, will help to prepare players for the large-scale combat that they can see in Planetside 2, and then can focus on learning the flow of the game and the map of the game, all the while knowing that there's not a single overpowered class, and that the scale of the game isn't something to find intimidating, but something to more or less grow into. And as you guys know, I've been incredibly skeptical about Planetside Arena since it was announced. In fact, I haven't exactly been the game's best supporter since it was announced. But with that said, I do have this hope that Planetside Arena will at least fulfill a role that Planetside 2 cannot, and that is teaching new players how to deal with the scale of the Planetside universe, because it is a game that I feel more new players would like to enjoy more had they had the opportunity to learn the flow of Planetside games a bit better. Planetside Arena will not do this entirely, I must reiterate that, but it is going to help in some degree, I hope. And I must also reiterate, guys, that the entire point of this video was to discuss the new player experience versus the veteran player experience. And if you're looking for a conclusion on that point, then this is what I have to say. At the end of the day, veteran players are always going to be a part of Planetside 2. Without veteran players, Planetside 2 will have no server population as it stands right now. And if those veteran players choose to farm away, then that is them enjoying the game. At the end of the day, they can't control who they come against, and they aren't responsible for the enjoyment of who they come against. It's just a simple matter of truth. And with that, we cannot vilify a veteran player for enjoying the game as they wish to do so. A new player is simply going to be one of the many targets that they will engage, both skilled and not. It's just a simple matter of how Planetside 2's open sandbox world works. And with that, hope Planetside Arena fixes some of those issues. And guys, this was one of the longer videos I've done as of late, so I do apologize for how long it was, but as I said, this was going to be a longer video. There was a lot to cover in this topic, and I wanted to make sure I covered everything in as much detail as I could and had some reasoning behind everything that I was saying. Guys, if you enjoyed today's video, then please do feel free to backhand that like button and backhand the subscribe button if you're new to the channel while you're at it. I invite you guys all to jump in the comment section down below and share some of your, what do you think about the Planetside new player experience? Do you think I raised some good points? Do you think I was going on tangents that made no no sense, let me know in the comment section down below, guys. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And if you made it all the way through this video, then kudos to you. You deserve a medal. I'm going to say that right now. Thank you once again for watching, guys. I'll catch you guys all in the next video. Peace out, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care, guys. Have a good one.